Hello, I'm Allie Urbancic, our Interim University Registrar. I'm happy to share with you today some registrar-related information on academic advising. I'm going to focus on spring 2021 registration, forms for students, what to look for on a degree audit, and where to go for assistance. The slides from this presentation, as Jennifer mentioned, are going to be made available to you. I have a lot of information to cover, and I'll move pretty swiftly to make sure we get through all of it, but you can refer back to this presentation and these slides anytime you like. I've also shared a lot of links, and so I really encourage you to keep these slides for reference and explore the tools available to advisors by following those links and taking a look at the sites, the pages that it'll direct you to. We don't have time to cover every resource in detail, but I'm hopeful that this introduction will help you know where to find everything that you need. On this slide, you'll see information regarding spring registration. The class schedule is currently being built in the Office of the Registrar. Advisors will be notified via email as soon as it's available in data view so that you can view that. Our goal is to give you as much time as possible to prepare to put together schedules and plans for advising before registration opens. So we definitely have that in mind and are focused on getting you information as quickly as we can. September 22nd is the deadline for curriculum changes for spring registration. Of course, students can change their majors or minors after this date, but if we receive it later than September 22nd, it could delay their ability to register for classes that are restricted to students with a major or minor in the department. It takes some time for the form to get approved and be processed, so the sooner the better on those curriculum changes. This year, students are required to get a flu vaccination and send documentation to the health center before October 12th to avoid any delays in registration for spring. If you have a student requesting an exemption for health concerns or religious reasons, please have them contact the health center directly. They have a process for reviewing those kinds of requests. Registration will open on October 19th. That date was selected by all the student services offices on campus working together. We selected this date to allow students as much time as possible to register for spring before starting fall 2020 final examinations. We want to make sure everybody leaves this semester with their full schedule. Students are sorted into what we call web registration groups, which gives them an assigned registration start time. This keeps the system from getting overloaded, which is what would happen if all the students registered at the exact same time. So we spread them out over several business days to make sure that everybody gets a set time. You can view their holds and their registration start times in data view, and advisors also receive reports with their advisees' registration times. And there's more to come on this later in my section of the presentation. Next slide, please. The calendar page linked at the top here includes both the full academic calendar and the final exam schedule. So you can use this link to find all the important dates and deadlines for the whole year. And if you're interested in seeing those dates on your individual Google Calendar, there is an embedded Google Calendar in the left pane on this page, and there's a button at the bottom that says Add to Calendar. If you click that blue button with a plus sign on it, it'll overlay the important dates from the academic calendar right on top of your calendar. It's helpful to have that visual reminder when important days are coming up. Use the registration tutorial link to watch a video showing what the student experience is like during registration in data view. This will help you support them as they go through this registration process themselves. The schedule grid is a convenient tool for sketching out a student's courses and visualizing their free and busy time to help you avoid scheduling conflicts. This document has been updated with the class schedule times that are unique to this year. We have extra time between classes. The catalog page has links to all the university catalogs from 1859 to present. Some of the old ones are really interesting. Use the first page of your advisee's degree audit to see which catalog requirements they need to complete. So if they started in 2017 and they're working under the 2017 catalog, that's helpful to know when you go to the catalog page and click the 2017 catalog link, because you'll see the requirements they'll be asked to meet based on when they started here and what catalog they're working under. I'll show you where this information is located on the degree audit in a later slide. The faculty and advisor information page includes the list of web registration groups, so you can see the criteria used to assign students to their registration times. It also includes a link to FERPA training online. General Counsel's Office has this training available only in the month of September, so you have a couple weeks left. If you haven't already, please follow that link and make use of that FERPA training. It's really useful and very important. Training is also available on the new student educational planning feature in DataVU, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. And it also will show you a link to committee meeting details. Student educational planning gives all faculty access to all student records. So if there's a student who has a second major in your department and you're helping them with the requirements, you don't have to have a colleague advisor assignment to view their record. You can pull it up through DataVU using the SEP link. This facilitates collaboration between students' primary advisor and faculty in other departments that provide support for additional majors and minors. The committee meeting details will help you find out when committees such as the Committee on Academic and Professional Standards, or CAPS, will meet to review any petitions for exceptions to deadlines or graduation requirements. Thank you. The electronic forms are available online for many registrar services. Many. Please guide your advisees to the forms page to use any of the forms listed on this slide. It's a great page to bookmark since the forms are used so often. This is what you can use to have your student put in a formal request for time conflict permission, SU grading that Laura was talking about earlier, overload status, independent study and research and internships. Pretty much anything your student will want to make an official request for our office to record for them. You can find a form for it, including some changes in enrollment status, like if they're not able to return or if they need a leave of absence, there's forms for that also available. Next slide, please. You can see an example of one type of form here. The student will type in their information on the e-form and click a submit button. They don't need a printer, they don't need to hand sign, they don't need to scan. They can do everything online, including clicking the submit button. If it is something that is authorizing us to register them for a course, there can be a little signature with a mouse button, and they can also click a type button if they don't prefer to sign with a mouse. So it's all there, all the steps that they need. The student, let's see here, the student will enter their information on the form and click submit. They'll receive a confirmation email. The form is then placed in the appropriate workflow for that type of form. So each form has its own workflow that says which people on campus need to approve it. That may include the instructor, advisor, department chair, academic dean, and sometimes even the provost. Once the required approvals are marked on the form, it's routed to the Office of the Registrar for processing. Please note that the beginning and end of the process are handled by registrar team members. It's not fully automated, so it may take a little time to get into the workflow. It may not be instant. And then when we're done processing the form, another confirmation email is sent to the students so they know that they can view this change on their record. Next slide, please. Students have access to many functions in DataVU, and these include everything on the list here: search for sections, registration, adding, dropping, withdrawing. Thank you to Laura for earlier specifying the difference between the two. They can also view their student restrictions to see if there's any holds they need to resolve before their registration start time. They can view their degree audit, their grades, their schedule. Students can also use self-service proxy to update permissions for parents and guests so that they can view certain parts of their record online. Again, like Laura was saying. Let's see here. Also, students can apply for graduation and place orders for transcripts and diplomas in DataVU as well. Next slide, please. This slide outlines how to make registration changes before and after deadlines. This is similar to what Laura was saying, but I'll just take the opportunity to point out in a little more detail. It's really important to know as we get ready for that next semester. So before the start of the term, students should register online through DataVU. During the first week of classes, which is also called the add-drop period, students can add and drop courses online through DataVU. After the add-drop deadline, which is posted on the academic calendar, students can withdraw from a course online using a different link in DataVU and receive a grade of W on the transcript. Like Laura mentioned, it does not affect the GPA. To request an add or drop after the deadline because of extenuating circumstances, students will use the CAPS registration change after the deadline e-form. If it's a late add, academic deans can approve those requests. They look for notes from the instructor and from the students to determine whether it's possible to catch up in the class and what the extenuating circumstances were for missing the deadline. Requests for dropping a course after the deadline are placed in a workflow that does reach CAPS, and this committee meets on the first Monday of the month. So in the meantime, students should withdraw through DataVU while awaiting the committee's decision so that it's clear to the instructor that the student is leaving the class. This slide, oh, and also sometimes the CAPS committee will look to see, did they actually leave the class? Did they withdraw? Sort of thing. So this next slide shows the criteria for reaching full-time registration status, which is at least 12 credit hours per semester. Our students need to average around 15.5 credits per semester to earn 124 credits, the minimum required for most valuable degrees, within 4 years. Students need to submit a form requesting approval for overload status if they want to exceed the credit loads that you see on the slide for their college or program. Student athletes, as Laura mentioned, need to maintain full-time enrollment status to be eligible to play. And if you have questions about the registration status requirements for international students, the Office of International Programs is great at helping with those. Next slide, please. Advisors receive some scheduled reports via email to assist them, and here I'll describe 2 of those reports. The advisee list with active registrations, accommodations, and registration times is well named. It helps advisors to track advisees' registration days and times, the registration holds, and any accommodations. Please follow up with any student on this report that's not registered after their registration time has passed, their start time, because we want to make sure, again, that everybody gets a full schedule for spring as early as possible. The weekly report on graduation candidates includes all advisees who have a graduation application on record. If you have an advisee who should be ready to graduate soon and isn't on the list, encourage them to apply for graduation through DataVU. It's a really short online form that basically says, who are you and what semester do you plan to finish? It also includes some regalia ordering information that's automatically routed to the bookstore. This report, I also wanted to point out, it shows whether they have unmet graduation requirements. So you'll see in an email arrive, and the message body of the email will give you a full description of how to use the information in the report, and it includes whether or not they have an unmet requirement that you should follow up on. This degree audit slide includes images of undergraduate degree audits from multiple programs across the university. So I'm going to go through a few degree audit slides in a row here, and I wanted to point out that each photo is selected to show you something to watch for as you review a degree audit for an advisee, but it is a compilation of multiple programs so that you can see examples from across campus of things that pop up on degree audits. On this first page, you'll see the student, the program, the catalog year. So that catalog line here, 2017, does show you which which general catalog to refer to if you want to check on a requirement that may seem unclear from the audit at first. It also shows you the anticipated completion date, the student's email address, who the advisor is, and whether a student is a member of Christ College. You can see on that line in the middle of the slide, CCN, thank you. And it will also show you whether they're on an athletics team. And the green box near the bottom of the screen is a table of the required credits and GPA for this student's program, as well as the student's progress on each. Make sure your advisee's GPA in the status box shows met rather than unmet, and that the anticipated remaining credits column shows zeros under institutional and overall credits. This box is really useful, but it's sometimes overlooked. Sometimes advisors miss that 124 or whatever the overall credit requirement is for their program and don't realize it till the very end of the semester, and it can cause graduation delays. On the next slide, you'll see that the degree audit is broken down into requirements for general education, majors, and minors. They're grouped into little boxes and they're numbered and lettered like an outline to show you which section that you're in. So this slide shows the general education requirements for one student. The status of each requirement is shown in the color-coded text. The green text here stating complete confirms that this student has met all requirements for that section. As a student registers for each required course, it's displayed next to the corresponding requirement. And as the final course grades are earned, the degree audit is updated to reflect whether the requirement moved from pending to complete, for example. Requirements for more than one course are shown as in progress until the final course is accounted for. Next slide, please. The world language requirement allows for specified combinations of courses within each language. So students should take 2 consecutive courses for 8 credits in the same language in many of our programs. This is mostly focused on arts and sciences, the way we have this structured, but to show you an example here of what that looks like, this section can appear confusing because it lists all the potential options, the allowed combinations of courses. And once the student registers for an allowed combination of courses, then the other options disappear. They fall away from the degree audit because they're no longer needed. It'll show only the courses that the student is actually taking to meet the requirement. So this requirement is somewhat complex, but that's to ensure that the students don't, for example, take 2 courses numbered 101 in 2 different languages. They have to reach a certain level of proficiency. They have to take 2 sequential courses in the same language. Next slide, please. This section shows the writing intensive course, or WIC requirement, and the humanities requirement, which are part of the general education program. Please note that the WIC courses are permitted for use in more than one category. If, for example, a student takes a section of THEO 200 that's an approved WIC, it may fulfill both the THEO 200 and the WIC requirements. Typically, gen ed courses are not allowed to fulfill multiple general education requirements, but the WIC courses are. In the humanities example here, please note that this student took more than they were required to take in the humanities, and that the extra section completed is marked with an asterisk X. The notes section at the end of the degree audit describes what this notation means, and in an upcoming slide, I've listed several notes as examples that you can view. Next slide, please. The major requirement lists all the courses required based on the catalog language from the year shown on that first page of the degree audit. The top of this box summarizes the credits earned and whether the GPA requirement is being met. The institutional credit requirement listed helps us to track whether the student is meeting our residence requirement for the major. Transfer credit does not count as institutional credit, but courses taken here at Valpo do. As the student registers for each course required in the major, this section is updated to reflect the term the course will be taken, and later when the course is complete, you'll see the grade. As mentioned earlier, any marks in the notes column on the right are described on the last page to provide clarity. Courses in progress, for example, are marked with an asterisk IP. Sections progress from not started to in progress to pending to complete status as the courses and grades fill in. Next slide, please. For advising in the College of Arts and Sciences, please read pages 40 through 51 in the current general catalog, in addition to the pages regarding your academic department. I also highly recommend the academic policies and the registration sections. They're very helpful, especially in preparing for registration advising. There are several academic regulations and restrictions on use of credits in A&S. Those are sometimes overlooked and can lead to graduation delays for students or CAPS petitions requesting exceptions. So give that a good read. Many programs require either a 40 credit major or a smaller major if it's combined with a minor. When a student applies for graduation, the registrar team takes a look at the degree audit, and the 40 credit requirement is waived. I'll show you an example of that, if there is a minor to go with it. This allows the degree audit to reflect a more accurate status, such as pending or complete at the end. Courses taken above the requirement are often displayed as additional or extra and are factored into the major GPA. You'll see them at the end of many majors, and I'll show you a slide with an example. As stated near the beginning of the Arts and Sciences heading in the catalog, no more than 60 credit hours from one subject may be applied toward the 124 required for graduation. Go ahead and go to the next slide, and you can see how on the degree audit, this section requires the student to complete at least 64 credits outside their major field of study. If you see this section is not yet complete, the student needs additional general education or elective credit. That way we can make sure that they don't exceed the 60 credit cap in a way that will delay their graduation. It's kind of confusing section, but let me know if you ever have questions on it. Essentially, they just need 64 credits of something other than their major. And the next one is this section titled Restrictions on Use of Credit Hours in CAS, the College of Arts and Sciences. monitors the amount of credit earned in categories that are limited within A&S, such as kinesiology, activity courses, and applied music, which includes studio instruction and ensemble. So just watch this section for any credit amounts that exceed the limits that are described on the degree audit. And there's more information in that section of the catalog, pages 40 to 51. Next slide, please. Near the end of the degree audit, there's a block labeled Other Courses. This section captures any courses that are not applied to a requirement. It's often useful to look here for courses that were replaced or retaken, AP scores that were too low to apply, or other courses that weren't quite used as expected. If you're looking for something and not quite sure why it didn't land in a certain area, you can often get clues here from seeing the list of other courses and seeing notes in the margin. This is a list that briefly summarizes the notes that you're likely to encounter on degree audits. Their descriptions are often helpful in interpreting the information you're seeing on the audit. I won't spend time on each line, but this is a great slide to keep on hand, or to just look at that last page on each degree audit when you come across one of these codes to see what it's telling you about that specific course. Next slide, please. The next 4 slides provide an example of what to expect for students that have multiple majors or majors plus minors, and each major will have its own section, as you see here. Each will include a summary of the GPA and the credit requirements along with their progress, and each will list the required courses and whether the courses were completed. Each will have their own status showing you whether it's in progress, pending, or complete. Next slide, please. As you see on this slide, the requirement for a 40 credit major was waived because the student had multiple majors. So this is what it would look like. You'd see that waived status, and you also see the exception print text that starts with 2 exclamation points that tells you that the degree audit has been updated. Next slide, please. This just shows you how that second major gets its own section and has the same summary at the top of all the details and the progress. Next slide, please. And in our example here, this student has a 3rd major. And again, it gets its own block, it gets its own summary at the top of the credits and the GPA requirements and how the student's progressing. And this example, a student received approval using an e-form for a course substitution. CAPS approved it and it was programmed right into the degree audit. And again, you see exception print text beginning with 2 exclamation points. Next slide, please. So now we're moving on to a resource called Confluence. This is the official platform for sharing knowledge at the university. You can visit confluence.valpo.edu and use the search field at the top to find assistance with everything from IT troubleshooting to policies for access and accommodations to registrar services. Confluence contains the knowledge base, business process documentation, and policies. The business process space is dedicated to recording the steps that employees take to perform tasks as part of university operations. Knowledge base is for sharing how-to articles, troubleshooting tips, and answers to frequently asked questions, which is often used by students and advisors, staff, faculty, everybody. As an advisor, you'll find helpful information in both business processes, how to do things for operations, and knowledge base, helpful answers to frequently asked questions. Each article has a label that will help you to navigate to related spaces and additional information in articles. Next slide, please. I encourage you to visit Confluence and explore it. It's really easy to use and it's full of helpful information. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like. You can see that search bar right at the top. And final slide, please. The Office of the Registrar is building a library of resources for all members of the Valpo community. So the links you see on this slide point to existing articles that are ready for you to use, and we're adding to it all the time. You can look at the student restrictions that Laura mentioned earlier to learn more about holds and help students reach out to the right office to get them resolved. This article even shows which student accounts holds do and do not prevent registration. What's the difference between SAD and SAP, for example? The article on overriding registration restrictions is really helpful during registration. The student educational planning article gives detailed instructions and screenshots for how to access student records through DataVU. I also recommend an article on how faculty and staff use proxy information to conform to FERPA regulations. This is another thing Laura mentioned. And as the name implies, you should look up an advisee's permissions before you speak with a parent or guest if they contact you. The schedule abbreviations will help you decipher the campus building abbreviations on the schedules. And the article on online instructional methods will help you identify courses being delivered in person, online, or in a hybrid format, so your advisees know what to expect at the start of the next semester. The next article shows how to approve a student request and preceptive content. This is what Laura's talking about in making sure you respond to those emails about e-forms in your queue for approval. There's a video that shows you click for click how to do that. And there's always room to grow. So if you have suggestions for new knowledge-based articles, please email them to registrar@valpo.edu, and I'll be happy to continue to expand this library and make it easy for everyone to find quick, detailed answers anytime you need them. So, I know it's a lot, but.
So we did have one question, Allie, that came up. They asked if you can talk about the course registrations wait list. How does that work for the student side of things, and if there's anything the advisor needs to do?
Sure, I can give you, since I'm a little over time, I can give you a very brief summary and let you know that we're working on a Confluence article on that so that it's clearer and you have a more detailed answer. But essentially, if a student goes to register for a course that is full, they will have an option to waitlist. They're placed on a waitlist in order that they add themselves. If a seat later becomes available, they get an email and they have 24 hours to use that email to respond, go online and add the course. And if department chairs want to manage their waitlist more closely, we're working on an article that shows them how to do that. But essentially that's it. The students can add themselves and they get an email telling them when there's a 24-hour window open for them to add.
Thanks, Ellie. Ellie does have to leave. She has another meeting coming up, but if there are additional questions for registrar, go ahead and put them in that chat box. And if others of us can't answer them, we will get that to Allie and then follow up with you with any answers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Allie. All right, next, Trisha's joined us to talk about the Learning Centers as resources for our students.
Hello, good morning, faculty and advisors.